Hello, everybody. This is Gary. Today is October 30th, Wednesday. It's noon p.m., noon in Eastern Standard Time in the United States in Rochester, New York. And this is my coping with schizophrenia vlog entry for today. Today, I wanted to talk about definitions. Definitions that people often use in the very wrongest sense. There are three terms that I wanted to focus on today that people get mixed up, and I want to make a clear definition for each one of them according to the American Psychiatric Association's Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. These three terms are psychopath, sociopath, and psychotic. The first thing is these three terms are not interchangeable. They do not mean the same thing. Um, People will often say that a mass shooter, and there's certainly been a lot of those over the past 20 years, are psychopathic, which is possible, but it's also possible they were psychotic. And if they were psychotic, that's not the same thing as a psychopath. And if they're a psychopath, that's not the same thing as being psychotic. Um, and sociopath is also not psychotic either, although it's kind of related to psychopath. But, anyways, the term psychopath as well as the term sociopath are two different types of people who don't have a conscience, who don't have a sense of wrong and right from any source, and so therefore they're able and capable of committing horrible acts because they just don't feel guilty over it and they don't feel any anxiety over it. They don't lose any sleep over it. They don't have no discomfort over it because they just don't have a conscience. They know intellectually what's right or wrong. They know intellectually what's against the law and what isn't against the law, and they don't care. A psychopath and a sociopath are also not exactly the same things, but they do both represent two types of people who don't have a conscience and therefore are very willing to commit horrible acts. So a sociopath and a psychopath simply don't have a conscience. Whether they become violent or not, being a psychopath doesn't mean you will ever become violent, and neither does being a sociopath necessarily mean you're going to become violent. Because sometimes people who are psychopaths or sociopaths, they have enough intellectual understanding to know that if they break the law, they'll go to jail or go to prison or be punished in some fashion. And so they avoid committing horrible acts of violence. But not because they would feel it was a terrible or evil thing to do, um, but because they're afraid of being punished, if nothing else. Um, so a psychopath or a sociopath might break the law, they might become violent, but they may not. They might have enough intellectual control over their own behavior to avoid committing really horrible acts, although their personal lives are probably filled with things like lies and cheating and things like that. So, what does the word psychotic mean? The word psychotic means it certainly doesn't mean a person doesn't have a conscience. It simply means a person has lost touch with reality, primarily through hallucinations and delusions. Hallucinations are when you perceive any of the five senses as picking up something that isn't real to other people, like hearing voices or seeing things that aren't really there. Um, so a psychotic person could be seeing demons or monsters or um, evil spirits. Um, they might have delusions about people following them or persecuting them when they're not. Um, they may have other delusions, like they think they're receiving personal messages through the television or radio set. Um, they're perceiving things that just aren't real, either things they believe which are false. Despite giving them evidence that what they believe is false, they continue to believe it anyways. Like, I have a history of paranoia. Sometimes I think people are following me when they're not, when I don't have any evidence or proof that they're following me. And I think it's a big grand conspiracy and all that. And I have no proof at all about any of that. And some people even point out evidence that proves me wrong, but I will continue to believe that idea that somebody's following me, trying to hurt me, that kind of thing. So I'm holding on to a delusion, a belief that isn't based in reality. I'm believing in it even if I'm presented with evidence to the contrary that proves that I'm wrong. Um, so hallucinations could happen through hearing things that aren't there, smelling things that aren't there, seeing things, tasting things, and touching things that aren't really there. But most hallucinations revolve around seeing and hearing things that aren't there, seeing things that aren't there through eyesight, and hearing things that other people can't hear because they're not really there, like hearing voices. Those are the two most common hallucinations. Yes, you can get hallucinations through tactile sensation of touching and feeling things that aren't really there, or smelling or tasting things that aren't really there, but that's a little bit more rare. Um, but it can affect any of the five senses. So to recap, sociopath and psychopath are two different types of people who don't have a conscience, who don't care about right or wrong, even if they have an intellectual understanding of right and wrong. They don't act on the basis of what's right or wrong, moral and immoral, because they just don't care. And they're not psychotic. They're not hearing voices. They're not seeing things. They're not having delusions. They haven't lost touch with reality. Matter of fact, a sociopath and a psychopath can very much be in touch with reality, and they just don't give a shit about other people's rights, or doing other things that are wrong. And a psychotic person is someone who actually loses touch with reality, as if they were taking LSD or some other hallucinogenic drug. If you take LSD, I've never taken it, but my understanding is it mixes up all your senses. You see and hear and taste things that aren't really there, smell things that aren't there. It's sort of like that. A psychotic state is when you are out of touch with reality because you're just not perceiving reality correctly. And usually that's through hallucinations and delusions. And some drugs can induce psychotic uh, episodes, like LSD, and other hallucinogenic drugs. Um, so those are the differences between a psychopath, a sociopath, and a person who is psychotic. A psychotic person may become violent. They may not become violent. Um, any of these three groups of people, I suppose, are capable of violence or breaking the law and hurting other people, uh, but not always. More often than not, a person who's psychotic or schizophrenic is a victim of violence and crime more than the perpetrator of violence and crime. Especially if you talk about mentally ill homeless people, they're very vulnerable to violence and being attacked and taken advantage of. So that's all I have to say about that. If anybody has any comments, suggestions, opinions about this video, or if you want to make a request for a video on a topic that I haven't done yet and you want to see a video about it, put it in the comments section, and I will try to get to it as soon as I can. But that's all for today's lesson, children. Like, subscribe, comment, and share.